First of all, yeah, let's talk about this. Is there anything new today? I have not heard any news today. I knew the news yesterday about the ceasefire. Is there anything today that's new?
I haven't seen any Russian response yet. I did see a press availability that Rubio gave on the way back to the U.S., apparently
Mm.
from an airport in Ireland. And he didn't really give that many more significant details, although he did say something that was implied by the announcement yesterday, which is
Mm.
that this proposal or this agreement for a ceasefire was not, quote, pre-arranged with Russia, and they're only hearing about it along with the rest of the world.
Okay, that's what
And he
Rubio said.
said, quote, yeah, I'll play the little clip here if you. Um,
Okay.
That's really the question here, and that is that's really the question here. As far as the Russian reaction to it, that's really the question here, and that is, this was a few hours old. We're going to bring it to them directly. We're going to say that Ukraine is prepared to stop all battlefield activity and begin the immediate process of negotiating an enduring end to the war, and we'll see what their response is. If their response is yes, then we know we've made real progress and there's a real chance of peace. If their response is no, it would be highly unfortunate and it would make their intentions clear. So that's what we're hoping to hear from them. And obviously, as I said, that this was not prearranged with them. So they're probably processing the news the same as the rest of the world. So we hope to have a positive answer from them. The ball is truly in their court.
Okay. Well, and here's a headline from today. Just looking at the last hour, if I could see any news. Talk of ceasefire and aid spurs hope in Ukraine, anger in Russia. So that's the Washington Post headline. It says Russian pro-Kremlin analysts, politicians, and nationalist military bloggers said Russia would probably reject the ceasefire as a trap that would harm Russian interests and benefit Ukraine. Let's see if there's anything I could skim this. If there's anything more interesting in this article. Um,
that's not really any kind of a new news.
yeah, I
It's
mean
just
it's
Washington
yeah.
Post characterizations of things.
Somebody said Putin went on Russian TV last night. One of somebody in our comments. I did not see any news about that. Uh, let's see.
I don't think so.
Yeah, I think he would. We would have
What's
heard about that.
an interview with Lavrov that came out today, but I happen to know it was recorded several days ago, so prior to this, with what they call American bloggers. So I guess Russia's resuscitating an old term to describe new media people. But this wasn't addressed because it hadn't happened yet.
Wait, what are you talking about? What are you saying?
A new interview with Lavrov came out
Uh-huh.
today,
Okay.
but it was recorded several days ago,
Uh-huh. Okay. So
so they
that's not
wouldn't
worth
have been
much.
able to address this.
Yeah, so that's interesting. So I'll tell you, I guess, how I see this. It seems to me that this is just them doing the minerals deal over again, and that the point of the minerals deal, I thought, was to get the hawks around the Trump administration basically wanted a way to get Trump pissed off at Putin. So they have this minerals deal with Ukraine. They get this idea that the U.S. and Ukraine are tied together. Trump becomes favorably inclined to send weapons and support. Uh, and then basically Putin somehow angers Trump if there's a ceasefire or if there's not a ceasefire, and then he turns on him. And so this is the same thing. They come in, it's like Ukraine just says, okay, we'll agree to a ceasefire, and then Putin either accepts it or he doesn't. And if he doesn't, like Trump gets mad at Putin at that point, right?
I suppose so. That could be the logic. I mean, I never quite believed that people like Mike Waltz and Marco Rubio, who were the point men at this engagement with Ukraine in Saudi Arabia, had totally like overhauled all of their prior positions on the Russia-Ukraine conflict. It seemed much more likely to me that what they had done is rhetorically accommodate themselves to what they assume Trump's instincts or preferences are. And so you've seen them adopt the Trump line of just wanting to seek peace and the killing, which I actually think is a more rational way to rhetorically frame the situation than the Biden approach of pontificating about the rules-based international order and like liberal democracy versus autocracy and et cetera, et cetera. But nonetheless, it's still really just rhetorical. And aside from the 10 or so day quote unquote pause of the U.S. weapons shipments and intelligence, nothing really about the policy has substantively changed despite the fanfare. And I should also caveat what despite the resumption of diplomatic contacts between the U.S. and Russia. So that is significant, but it hasn't changed the underlying policy yet.
Well, nothing has changed. I mean, nothing. I mean, yeah, it's not like we have a brand new policy. That's right. We're just sort of trying to, there hasn't been a deal signed. We're trying to sort of forecast where this is all going and what exactly is happening. So, like, yeah, I mean, it's the idea that Rubio and Walls, they never change their opinion. I mean, sometimes people, so like they could be, people could have opinions, but they could be kind of just the president can impose their will on them, right? So if like Trump and Vance have very strong views on Ukraine and Russia and ending the war, they could probably push around Rubio and Walls, who just want to. And so there was a political story about how Keith Kellogg, who we thought like him being appointed as the envoy, I think, to the Russia-Ukraine conflict or whatever his position is, he's been frozen out. They say he's not in Jeddah, and he's just not kind of as much in the conversation. So we took that as an indication maybe we were getting a policy that was less tilted towards supporting Ukraine. But yeah, who knows? I mean, so like I think Rubio and Walls are probably spend more time thinking about Ukraine than JD Vance does. It's a bureaucratic maneuvering, probably more than Trump does. Trump is worried about his tariffs and doing ads for Tesla, on the White House lawn. And so, yeah, it seems logical to me that maybe Walls uh, and Rubio are probably in the driver's seat here, and they're probably finding ways to, in language that Trump can understand, in ways that Trump can justify to himself, get him to the pro-Ukraine position.
Yeah, and there would be nothing particularly unusual about the Secretary of State and the National Security Advisor being, to some degree, in the driver's seat. That was definitely the case with the Biden administration. It often seemed like, although obviously Blinken and Sullivan could play off what Biden's preferences are, they were the ones probably more actively formulating the policy, not least because of Biden's probably diminished capacities. Not quite the same situation with Trump, but that's why, the executive branch is so capacious and requires so many tasks to be delegated that, subordinates are inevitably going to drive the policy to some extent. But one thing that I think is notable is that, so if you want to forecast over what forecast what the implications of this are, one thing that struck me is that for all the hubbub over the past 2 weeks about this supposed rupture between the U.S. and Ukraine, culminating with that blow up at the Oval Office, what happened afterwards? Yes, the intelligence and arms shipments were at least ostensibly paused, although I'm not sure we quite know the full extent of that yet. Now they've been resumed after 10 days, which I think is like survivable for Ukraine. And also, I think on a political level, Zelensky went to different European gatherings over the past 10 days, including at the one that I was at in Brussels, this European Council meeting. And what I got the sense of was that the Europeans were very diligently trying to craft a new political message or approach or tact for Zelensky that would reunify Ukraine, the EU, and the US.
Mm-hmm.
And it seems like this has now been accomplished because even the most hawkish European leaders on Ukraine are at least claiming that they're all in favor of this. They're even repeating Rubio's new talking point, which is that the ball is now in Russia's court. So now, like, they're displacing the burden of resolving the war onto Russia, and Russia, as far as I could tell, would really not have much strategic reason, just from their own perspective, to accept this at this juncture. They're about to collapse the Kursk salient, as far as I could tell, and they're making modestly incremental gains on the main line of contact. And so, why would all of a sudden Putin accept terms of a ceasefire that's just been dictated to him by his opponents if there's not really any other incentive for him to agree to it, other than maybe, I guess, placating Trump? But I don't know. I guess it's possible that they'll accept it, but I know that the actual pro-Russian hawks would be furious. I mean, they're already like claiming betrayal from Trump today, like people like Scott Ritter and Brian Berlatic and other people who are like actual pro-Russia, activists, I guess. They're all up in arms right now because they're claiming that Trump has revealed that he's snookered his voters. And
Yeah. So what's happening in Kursk is kind of interesting. It is a kind of one card Ukraine has to play because I've seen Zelensky and they would talk about, oh, we have Russian territory now, so in the end we can like trade that for something, even though it's very very tiny. At least it's symbolic. It's something they can trade. Like Ukraine doesn't want that in the long run. It just wants to get rid of it. And it's something to have it. So the fact that Russia has been pushing back on that, some of the media reports have suggested this might be tied to the lack of intelligence sharing with the U.S. I think that the Russians were making gains anyway, but the idea is like, whatever, the US was sending them satellite imagery and they knew when the Russians were coming or where they were, and now they didn't have that. And so Russia was able to make gains to almost close out the Kursk salient. Now, if that's true, then there was a significant strategic impact of the intelligence pause. I don't know if that's what made the difference, but
isn't that
if
just
it did,
speculation, though? I mean, is there any hard evidence showing that there was a direct impact from the pause in
no, we don't know. I mean, all we know
Because
is there was.
my
They say
understanding
there
is
was
that
a pause.
that salient has been collapsing for months.
Yeah, yeah, but I mean, it happened quickly. I think the pacemaker. So yeah, it's speculation. I don't know what kind of evidence do you want that they didn't have intelligence. I mean, that's what the media's reported that there was. They stopped intelligence sharing, and then they had some setbacks on the battlefield. If it could be connected or could not be, I don't know. Um, but yeah, yeah, and so the things. I mean, the things you're saying. More generally, are interesting. The fact that all the Europeans are on board. I mean, yeah, this is a good
I mean,
indication.
you
So
have the
the
president of Latvia today. I mean, the Baltics are always been the most hardcore
yeah.
anti-Russia, pro-Ukraine, basically echoing verbatim the White House and repeating Rubio's mantra on the ball now being in Russia's court.
Yeah,
So
this is
if the Baltics and
significant. Yeah,
the U.S. are now on the same page, that's a much different dynamic than what a lot of people had assumed 2 weeks ago.
yeah. I think that's right. I think that's another good indicator. You brought up the fact that the minerals deal. It was like the New York Post and the Washington. Was the New York Post? Well, it was Wall Street Journal and these other hawkish places. They were all in favor of the minerals deal. Now they seem to be in favor. Yeah, I mean it's really funny. I mean it just backs up what we were saying about the minerals deal and like how Zelensky just kind of incompetently blew it up. And remember, right after that, they had these every European leader is basically tweeting out, we stand with Ukraine, blah blah blah, right? And then Zelensky's retweeting them and thanking them, and digging at Trump. So like you could see the daylight at that point. So they're together with the minerals deal. Then the Oval Office blow up happens. They're split, and now we have this new thing. Okay, Ukraine has agreed to a ceasefire. Now the ball is in your court. Putin. Yeah, this looks like the Hawks are. I mean, the
I mean, it's
Hawks
kind of
very
ironic that
broadly
the
defined.
Hawks are getting their way by adopting a ceasefire. Like, that's kind of counterintuitive. But given the context, it's
Yeah,
obviously a method by which to now potentially pin the blame on
yeah,
Putin, or as some people were saying, trap
Right.
Putin.
So Putin, I mean, Putin could accept
But
it.
I think a lot of these like pro-Russian people who are also like MAGA
Yeah.
or MAGA adjacent had thought that what Trump would do is just pull out the rug from under Ukraine completely and basically initiate negotiations with Russia that were all just about like negotiating the terms of Ukraine's surrender. And that never seemed logical to me, in part because of, yes, who was in the administration, but also I just don't think it's as in Trump's nature as some people wanted to believe that he would automatically just cede a conflict to like a quote unquote adversary. Um, yeah, maybe he would want to prosecute the conflict more on his own terms and with some kind of compensation in the form of this
What do
so-called.
you think about when he tried to pull out of Syria in the first term, and then like it sort of the media went crazy, and and then he changed his mind, right? So he's like he like kind of quickly just pulled out of a place he didn't want to be. So there's some kind, but then he switched himself, obviously. But there is kind of precedence for like Trump just abandoning some kind of military
Well, no,
project, right?
then Trump. I mean, Trump is always all over the place, right? So you have to just stay focused on what is actually done tangibly. Trump, yeah, did indicate that he wanted to remove troops from Syria, but then he decided to support retaining troops in Syria because they were taking the oil.
Yeah,
So that was like a pillaging logic for why to
yeah,
maintain that U.S. military
yeah. I
base.
guess this was the
And there's
this was the
something similar
template.
going on now with Ukraine. So
Yeah,
now Trump's
exactly.
getting paid.
Is he? I mean, is he like that big of an idiot? Like, or is he just like he just is doing the path of least resistance? And if you just give him an idea that's like easy for him to do, you go to him and say, "Oh, Trump, we're going to steal everything." He like sort of knows it's not real, but whatever. It gives him some kind of fig leaf. Like, I don't think he's that stupid, right? I think he sort of knows, like, he knows what's going on.
I've never thought that he's stupid. I mean, you cannot win the presidency twice. You can't become the first president to win 2 non-consecutive terms since Grover Cleveland and be
Mhm.
stupid.
Yeah,
You at the very least have to be
he's sharp.
politically adroit.
Yeah. Uh-huh.
And so, I mean, I do think one way to look at what's going on in Ukraine now is in the context of his broader expansionist project that he just decided to fill everyone in on after the election. Like, I don't recall him necessarily going around saying, yeah, we're going to annex Canada, we're going to annex Panama, we're going to take over Gaza. Greenland, yes,
But I think
Greenland, yes,
that's the
was
stuff you could.
mentioned in in the first term, but like it was not a live policy item that he really ever brought up, as far as I know, in 2024. So my interpretation of this Ukraine minerals deal, which now apparently is finally going to be signed, that was a provision in the joint statement that was put out yesterday. Maybe if like Zelensky can bite his tongue for 5 minutes this time. But that really does formalize a kind of like quasi-colonial relationship between the U.S. and Ukraine. It's not just a minerals deal. I don't know if we talked about this, but like you should actually read the text. It's far beyond minerals. It's
Yeah, I've read the text.
yeah, Ukraine's natural. Yeah, oh yeah, we talked about it. Yeah, it's like Ukraine's like almost all extractable natural resources and then physical infrastructure.
Yeah.
So I think it's like almost prudent to look at it more in this context of Trump wanting to expand American imperium, but with his own twist.
I don't buy that because there's like stuff
Why?
that Trump says that have like a real basis and like end up in like connections to reality, and there's things that don't. So the tariffs thing we're learning is real. He's at least going to place a bunch of tariffs for a little while. The expansion thing, I mean, he's not sending troops to Gaza. He's not actually taking over Greenland. What are the other things he's talking about? There
How do
hasn't
you
been
know?
like, how do I know he's not taking over Greenland?
Or I mean, it doesn't even necessarily have to require sending troops to Gaza, but he's said it many times that the U.S. will be taking over Gaza in some capacity. Now that's pretty
Yeah.
vague,
Well, he says
but
that,
I
but I
don't know
don't think.
why that would be ruled out.
Well, why would it be ruled out? Because like it's it's an unlikely thing to do. Like Canada. So you take the Canada thing seriously too?
I mean, how many times does he have to say the same thing before we take it? I mean,
Well,
I just
because
don't
it's
know like what
crazy. If
heuristic are we
he
using
used
here.
to say I'm going to send a
He
woman to
repeated
the
it
moon.
yesterday.
He said he used to say for years I'm going to send the first woman to the moon, and he's never sent a woman to the moon, and he's never sent anyone to Mars, even though he says stuff like that
I
all
don't
the
remember
time.
that.
Yeah, yeah. He used to say woman to the moon because I guess we've sent a man to the
Okay, but
moon.
he's now taken tangible action with regard to Canada. I don't know. You tell me. Maybe you're a bigger economic
No,
genius than I
it's
am.
contradictory to the tariff thing. No, he's fighting with Canada.
No, but I thought the logic was he's going to collapse the Canadian economy. So in desperation, they say, "Please save us, America and Trump. We want to join you." I
I
mean,
don't know. I don't know
I
where you
don't know.
get
You
that
got.
side from.
I think maybe I don't want to over psychoanalyze Trump or like any world leader because that can be really tedious. But you do have to sort of remember that Trump ascended to office the second time under like really extraordinary circumstances, which might have been the biggest ego boost that anybody in the world has ever received.
After the assassination too.
Well, after
That's a
the
yeah.
attempts to
He
prosecute
thought
him, like if he didn't win,
yeah.
he might have ended
He
up in
thought he was chosen
prison.
by God. Yeah.
They tried to bankrupt him. Yeah, people think he says he was saved by God from the assassination attempt. Um, so,
I mean, is he gonna? But
he's right
he's
now
doing it.
at maximum political latitude.
But
So
there's a simpler political explanation of like the tariffs.
there could
He
be
just likes
there could be
tariffs.
delusions or of grandeur that I
Yeah.
think it's easy to write off, but might actually be real.
Yeah. Okay. Well, I mean, it's a fascinating, intriguing possibility. Um, I think the tariffs thing has a simpler explanation, which he just loves tariffs. He's loved tariffs for 30, 40 years. He just can do stuff now he wouldn't do in the first
But what's
administration
the end
because
goal? Like just tariffs for their own sake?
yes, he thinks trade is bad and that like you're ripping. He always has loved tariffs, and they have goals that are contradictory. Like they'll say we're going to make so much money off of tariffs, then they say everyone's going to produce things in the U.S., which is contradictory because if everyone produces things in the U.S., you're not going to get money off the tariffs, right? He just has a kind of thing. It's like the way that he doesn't like immigration, right? He just doesn't like foreigners, and he sees the world as zero sum, right? And so he doesn't like immigration. He doesn't like trade. And the tariffs is just like the solution to all the world's problems. It's not specific to Canada. Canada's just closer. He's doing it. He's doing it to Mexico. He's doing tariffs on China. I mean, he just loves tariffs. This is like a consistent part of his worldview. So it's like he's doing tariffs, so Canada collapses, and then they join the U.S. That's like a much more complicated explanation for something
But
that's
he
much
did
simpler, which is just
tariffs
like
in the first term on a lesser scale and mainly directed at China, right? So
yeah.
there was an end goal there that was at least discernible, which is to rectify, to, further geopolitical competition on America's behalf with China. What is the end goal with Canada? I just don't quite buy.
It's a stupid policy. It's just
But he's
what's the
saying
end
what
goal
his
with
end
Mexico?
goal
What's
is.
the end goal with Mexico? Is he going to
He's
annex
saying that he
Mexico?
wants Canada to join the U.S. Like,
Okay, what is the end goal with
maybe it's a dumb
Mexico?
goal. Maybe it couldn't be achieved. But that I don't see any real reason why now to doubt that is what his actual goal is.
Because it's a complicated theory for what's a simple, straightforward explanation, which he just likes tariffs and hates trade, which is just like consistent with Trump.
But how is it
Is all
overcomplicating the theory just to look at what he said now probably dozens of times,
look
including
if
his
there's any
yesterday?
evidence. I get he says this stuff over and over again. Now you'll need something that can be explained. You'll need something. It's an extraordinary thing to advocate, right? Expansion. It could be
It's also an
true.
extraordinary thing to have concealed over the course of a 2-year presidential campaign and only revealed once you won the election.
Yeah, it is. It's yeah, it is funny. I
I was
mean,
just telling somebody I'm almost in favor of it happening just so I can watch Trump have to negotiate with the Quebec separatists.
yeah. Well, he thinks trade is. It doesn't make any sense, but he's. I'll say this: he is bolder and much less restrained than he was in his first administration. So that could be enough to explain the tariffs, but it could also explain like he could do something crazy. Like, okay, I mean, I'll admit, look, if we see something direct, like sanctions on Denmark and like an explicit negotiating position that you give us Greenland, or like sending some troops to Canada, sending troops to the U.S. Canada border, or like Greenland, or like having some hostile kind of naval action or Air Force action. Like you can see that, so you can imagine that
Well,
stuff,
he's
right?
never said that he wants to seize Canada by military force. He's been saying
Okay,
it's through economic coercion.
Okay, so like, okay, then his
And
plan
he
doesn't
does
have any
apparently. I
hope.
mean, he probably would. Like, let's say he wanted to actually collapse the Canadian economy. He probably has the power to do that, right?
Maybe, I don't know. I don't have enough knowledge to say so, but yeah, he has potential to harm but the idea that the Canadian economy would collapse, so they say, let's become part of the United States. This guy Trump, who, the guy
Please,
who's
sir, we're so
responsible.
tired of winning.
Yeah, I mean, it's a stupid. If that's the plan, it's not. That's why I bring up the military
I'm
thing
not
because
saying it's
that's
an
the
intelligent plan. I'm just saying
okay.
it's like what the plainly articulated plan seems to be.
No, he doesn't say. But that's your. But yeah, that's your. You're putting different things together. You're putting the tariffs together with his expansion thing. But he's never said. He's given a lot of justifications for tariffs. It's never been the tariffs are going to my knowledge, the tariffs are going to make Canada our 51st state. Like, is there any evidence he's ever like made that connection?
Did
Because he
you
gives like a lot of
have you
reasons for
been
tariffs.
browsing Truth Social lately?
Of Trump, has he said that they're going to become 51st state due to the
No, of the
tariffs?
other many users of Truth Social that we all log on to see what they're writing. He says this was yesterday.
Okay, tell me what he says.
I will substantially increase. He's threatening to substantially increase on April 2nd the tariffs on cars coming to the U.S., which will essentially permanently shut down the automobile manufacturing business in Canada.
Okay.
Those cars can be easily made in the USA. Also, Canada pays very little for national security, relying on the United States for military protection. We are subsidizing Canada to the tune of $200 billion a year.